Right, so this is going to be interesting for both of you then. So, Snatcher is a game that was originally released in Japan in 1988 and bounced around on the MSX2 and the TurboGrafx in Japan until we finally got a Western release in 1994 for the Sega CD, the much ill-fated and celebrated Sega CD.
Wait, who celebrates it?
Mostly Mark.
I'll get to this. I'll get to this in a bit. The story is about a guy called Gillian Seed, who is a junker who's part of this task force that are assigned to capture and destroy what are called Snatchers, which are, it's kind of this like invasion of the body snatchers thing where they're these robotic creatures that will murder like high status citizens in this kind of like fictionalized version of Kobe City in Japan, and it's like a post-apocalyptic world, and they then sort of like assume the role of these people, and like there's this kind of ongoing crisis of these creatures in society that are, you know, taking these high positions of power. So you're assigned as part of this task force to try and deal with them. The interesting thing about this game for you two is that this was directed by Hideo Kojima.
Hello.
His game really, you know, obviously before Metal Gear Solid, which came in, I want to say 98, I think was when Metal Gear Solid was. Yeah. So I'd always been interested in this game, and I've always been interested in Kojima from sort of an arm's distance, an arm's length. Like, I appreciate what he does. I don't necessarily actually enjoy playing his games, but Snatcher is one of those games that has constantly appears in like, you know, like biggest kind of best cult classic type games made by developers that you might not be aware of, games that are, you know, most in need of a remaster or a port to make them available to more players, because, you know, for Western players, the only means of playing this is obviously either having a Japanese version of this game, and this game is a very like narrative text heavy game, so you're not going to get much out of it, or having your hands on a Sega CD, which is about 4 people. So I obviously played this through other means, and we'll leave it at that, but it was a game that I'd been really interested in and wanted to kind of play. And it is, so, you know, people talk about how Kojima introduced this idea of, you know, film and cinematography to the video game space with Metal Gear Solid, and I will, you know, I'll give the man credit. That motherfucker was doing that some 10 years earlier with what this game is doing. Obviously not in terms of you know, the way like the camera's set up and that kind of stuff, but certainly for like the 94 Western release, it's got full voice acting, which is, it's pretty decent. It's a bit clunky in places, but it's still like fairly decent. It has this full involved storyline, which in fairness is 1 part Akira, 1 part Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1 part The Terminator, and about 12 parts Blade Runner. It's obviously, Kojima is someone who always has not exactly been subtle about where his influences come from.
Wears them on his sleeve, I think, is a generous way of putting it.
What's that?
Wears them on his sleeve is a generous way of putting it.
Tattooed on his sleeve would be a generous way of putting it. So the
did you guys, sorry to jump in, Mark, did you guys see that picture of him with Michael Bay this week?
Yeah. Of course I did, yes. That's a man who enjoys, you know, his Western cinema. But the Blade Runner influence is, you know, more extreme than anything. You know, the opening, like, intro credits sequence is like a 1-for-1 replication of that introduction in Blade Runner, where the camera is going over the city. You've got the flames coming out. You've got the giant, like, pyramid type structures. All of that is in there, but it's done in this kind of glorious 32-bit form, or 16-bit, I guess. And it looks amazing, and it's got this incredible like jazz noir soundtrack playing over it, and immediately it's like, okay, you know, Kojima does certain things well, and in terms of setting a tone and a theme and a style, that motherfucker knows what he's doing, and I will give him that.
Yep.
The problems that I have with this game, and there are many, It's a very like narrative driven game. You're working your way through menus. It's kind of like a semi open world where you can go between different areas, and then once you're in the area, you can do certain things. You can look at certain items, you can investigate certain items, you can talk to people if they're there, you can present them items if you're holding them, and it's basically, you know, like a point and click sort of thing where you're just trying to find the MacGuffin that you need to progress the story along. But because it's all done through the menus, and the menu system is very, very clunky, where there might be like a hidden thing that I haven't discovered yet in the room. So I'll go to look, and then I'll go to like draw, and then in the next thing it will say you have found whatever thing. Then it like gives you that as a new thing that you can select, but it takes you back to the start of the menu, so you don't have to go to look, then draw, then whatever the new thing is. And you might not even be aware that you have found like new things. So there's a lot of navigating the menu in a way that I'm sure someone in 2022 would look at that and just go, nah, fuck this, we can do a much more streamlined version of that. And that absolutely could happen, and it would make the experience of all of like navigating the menu system just that much more of an enjoyable process, because it just does get a bit fiddly at points. The writing is problematic at points. So like Gilliam, his character, he has amnesia, and him and his wife, they're married, but they don't know why they're married because they both have amnesia. So, you know, they decide to, like, they're separated, but they still kind of keep in contact with each other, and they sort of establish this really early on. But literally, like, the first, and you can tell that he's conflicted about this, and he still has feelings towards her, and he doesn't really want to do that, but he kind of just, they feel like that's for the best for the moment. Literally, the first fucking character that you meet is this female receptionist, and it gives you options to, like, compliment her and ask her out on a date, and all these kind of ways that are just, like, they don't add anything to the plot or the context of his character or the relationship of their character, because it's not like you can say one of these creepy things and then that becomes like a talking point later on. It's just there because you know, I don't know, Kojima thought it would be funny to put in, and it's really outdated and really kind of just shows itself for like the period of time of when this was written, and one of those things where you can clearly see, like, okay, there wasn't a woman working on this game, certainly in the writing aspects of it, because this just wouldn't, you know, fly in 2022, and it shouldn't. It just doesn't need to be there. That's really the two main issues, but they take up a large kind of amount of the game because, again, it is very kind of text driven. But like some of the sequences, like the visual, the art style, some of the imagery that's used, it's a badass looking game. It's pretty fucking rad with just the way it looks and sounds, and it captures that cyberpunk aesthetic in a way that, like, games that actually have the term cyberpunk in them don't sometimes. It's pretty cool, and I'd imagine that you both have the kind of capabilities to play this on your Retroid. So
I would imagine so.
Yeah,
a Retroid I built myself.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's about 6 to 7 hours long. There are a couple of times I had to just go and look at a video clip because I could not figure out what, like, it wanted me to do in a certain sequence, and I was going back and forth through a couple of rooms and just not getting anywhere. But like the story is engaging enough that I saw it through, and you know, I was fairly satisfied with it. So definitely like a flawed but super interesting game from someone who you could clearly tell was going to go and do massive things.
Someone from themselves who is he is flawed and interesting himself.
Yeah, and you know, there's even little nods. Like you have a robotic companion with you that's called Metal Gear. There's a like an entertainment area that you go to called Outer Heaven. Like there's loads of these little nods that would be used in Metal Gear. So it's cool. I'd really recommend checking it out, even for the first kind of hour or so, just to get a flavor of it.
Are there any nano machines?
There is no mention of nano machines. No,
that's
the one thing that sadly is a mission. But like the Snatchers themselves basically look like T800s or T100. I can't remember whatever the model is in Terminator. But like which
model are you thinking of?
I'm thinking OG, like
T800, isn't it?
T800, yeah.
Yeah, T1000 is the liquid metal Terminator.
But it's like it's to the point that you are kind of surprised that there wasn't some sort of copyright infringement. Like it's a 1-to-1. It really is.